to another week of Consumer Says. My name is Sofia, and I'm here with my co-host Kayla. Hi, Kayla.
Hi, Sophia.
This is a bi-weekly podcast for those of you who are new. We are a part of the Morning Consult Economics Intelligence team, and we discuss our survey results that give some perspective into the consumer perspective of different economic issues. This week is going to be a special feature on the holidays and consumer demand. We actually have a guest, our very own Claire. We like to call her Retail Claire because she's an expert on retail spending and shopping trends. So she has a great pulse always on different trends and different shopping seasons. So really excited to pick her brain. But before we have her join, we're going to talk about consumer demand, specifically through our Consumer Health Index, which Kayla is the inventor of. So Kayla, do you want to give us a temperature check? It's a little bit different because we're going to break it in by income today. But why don't you give us an introduction of what is the Consumer Health Index? What are the pieces behind it, and what does it tell us about maybe demands for the next few months?
Great. Yeah. So the Consumer Health Index is an index that we came out with this year. And the goal behind it was to kind of give a more holistic measure of consumer demand, similar to what we've been doing with consumer sentiment, but a little bit more specifically linked to household finances and actually spending outcomes. So the way that we did that was we actually combined our high frequency daily index of consumer sentiment data with another indicator that we have on that same survey, which is our unemployment data, and sort of combine those two metrics to come up with an index that has historically tracked at the all adults level pretty closely with spending growth year over year. So that was sort of the way that we devised this index. And it's had some pretty interesting developments since we launched it earlier this year. Over the summer, in Q3 especially, we saw a pretty big drop in consumer health overall, and across all income groups. But interestingly, over the past month or so, we've been seeing an increase in the consumer health indexes for both the low income, which is under 50K per year, and the high income, 100K plus. The middle income has stayed kind of flat. So we've actually seen some recovery at the lower end,
Mhm.
which is really interesting. And they had dropped way down at the time when you were hearing in earnings reports about softening foot traffic, a lot of trading down, things like that. But it looks like things have been looking up a little bit. What seems to be the driver of that is really both components. Sentiment has improved, especially after the election, as people are maybe anticipating better stock values, things like that. But also our unemployment index, which is a component in there, has been improving really right around the time after the Fed made the rate cuts. We were even saying on our team call today, the rate cuts seem to have worked pretty fast if you look at our unemployment index. So,
Yeah.
anything to add on that, Sophia? I know you've been looking a lot at our income data too.
Yeah. That's a great summary. I would say, although it has been improving for the lower income group, you mentioned that and that it really decreased a lot for them before kind of the earlier months of this year. So it has improved, but they're still really subdued. We'll put up the chart in this, and you can kind of see how they're still quite below middle and high income people. And I thought it was also interesting that the middle income group has kind of been they declined kind of a lot, also not quite as much as the low income group, their consumer health index. But they've kind of been stagnant in that consumer health index, not seeing the recovery that low income people did, but they're still doing better in terms of their health as measured by that index. And one of the stories we keep talking about in a lot of our research is just how high income people continue to do really well and prop up spending, and they're probably the reason in large part that we continue to chug along, especially in 2024, because they just keep doing better and better across a lot of our consumer finances data. And then one more thing I wanted to say is I just love the consumer health index because it's just a new way to think about some data that's been kind of like more difficult to parse out lately. So the for in particular ICS the index of consumer sentiment has, there's been a lot of debate and discussion and almost drama about why it's so subdued when the economy is doing pretty well. But I think that by taking the specific current personal finances portion of the ICS and combining it with unemployment gets us away from some of the vibey problems that we get with ICS. So I think it's a really helpful measure, and it'll be interesting to talk to Claire about it. Is there anything you want to add before we bring on Claire?
Well, I just realized we forgot to assign temperatures to our different groups.
Oh yeah.
So if we were to say, I think your summary was a really good bridge for that. I would say the high income, as you said, it's been sunny skies, sunny weather. They're cruising
Mhm.
along steady eddy, 70 degrees or so, I would say, with their consumer health index. Another feature of it is that we do have sort of that zero bound as sort of the anything above that is indicating expansion, anything below that could be contraction. The low and middle income have both been below that zero level, for what it's worth. So, yeah, a little, if we're assigning temperatures there, it looks like the middle income. And I also liked how, Sophia, you've said about different, seasonally, where are they? Seems like they're maybe stuck in March or something.
Mhm.
Maybe it's, chilly, 58 degrees, sort of going along like that. Whereas the low income, way, way down, colder winter, but I think it might be maybe farther into the springtime for them. There's a little bit more thawing. Maybe the days
Mhm.
are getting longer. So, um, I don't know what temperature to give them.
Mhm.
45 going on 49, maybe.
Yeah. I like that. And I think a lot of it does have to do with unemployment because we have seen that improving. Not only in our data, but also the BLS's unemployment rate. It went up, but it kind of went back down. So hopefully that helps people in the holiday season because, the holiday season's a great time for us to all to get together, but also splurge, and we don't want anyone missing out on it. I think that's a good segue. We can bring in Claire to ask her about what she's seeing so far. The holiday season has already kind of started. We've already had some big sales already, so I'm excited to pick her brain about all things holidays.
Me too.
Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, hello. We have Claire with us. She's one of our analysts and experts. We like to call her Retail Claire, as I mentioned earlier in our intro. I think that's also her Twitter/X handle, but she knows a lot about trends and shopping and things that sometimes, Kayla and I don't really know the weeds of in the macro econ space. So I'm really excited to pick your brain, Claire. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, it's so fun to have you here, and I love that you're dressed for the holiday season.
Always on theme.
So- yeah. So we just want to start really broad and ask you if, what are the overall trends that you're seeing in this holiday season versus past holiday seasons, or what has really jumped out to you? You've done a lot of research and put out several memos on Morning Consult's page, but what has really jumped out to you this year in 2024?
It's got to be the economy and inflation, right? That's been the main story in the consumer spending world this year. So, a lot of my focus has been on understanding how that increased sense of pressure that consumers are feeling is going to impact their holiday spending. And what I'm seeing on that note is just a lot of like mixed sentiment. People are always excited about the holidays. We asked how people are feeling about their finances this holiday season, and there's more positive sentiment than negative sentiment. But we do see a fair amount of people say, they're worried and stressed out about it. Um, but generally, people want to preserve their traditions. They want to celebrate. They want to get together with friends and family, and they are willing to spend a bit of money to make that work.
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting. And right before this, we were talking about some of that murkiness in sentiment data that we're seeing and how it maybe varies by different households, different, across different consumer groups. Um, but speaking of sort of household financial conditions, we've seen a little bit of a mixed picture, especially with, lower middle income adults this year, maybe feeling more price sensitive and stuff like that. What do you expect to see from households who do have tighter budgets this season? The ones who are feeling maybe a little more negative or worried about or stressed about spending for the holidays.
Sure. So the households where we see higher stress are also where we're going to see taking on more debt to cover all of their holiday expenses. People with particularly negative financial sentiment about the holidays are much more likely to say they're going to use a buy now, pay later loan to spread out some of the payments so that they can maintain the type of celebrations they want to have. They can be generous gifting with their friends and family, but they need to balance that out with a little bit of debt to make it work. It's not all bad. 57% of consumers did say that they already had savings set aside for those holiday expenses, and 20% did say that they will go into debt. But generally, the broader theme here is that people do, and this is typical of any year, tend to pull back on their day-to-day expenses in order to make a little bit of wiggle room in their budgets for some of those holiday expenses like gifts, clothing, celebrations, decor, if they have to travel to see someone. So maybe that's, being a bit more budget conscious while you're at the grocery store so that you can splurge a little bit more on the groceries for the big celebration events, is really where we typically see people trying just to kind of massage their household budgets to make it work.
So, in that vein, what are there things that are maybe certain gifts or types of gifts that consumers are prioritizing, especially when they're on a tighter budget? Or do you see maybe certain things being cut because maybe it's tighter this year than last year?
Sure. Well, to be clear, gifts and celebrations are the top priorities for people in the holiday season. So people are really going to allocate as much as they can toward gifts. And people also generally say that gifts aren't really what is the main stressor for their holiday finances. Things like travel, especially if you have to go farther from home and get on an airplane, that's where a lot of that stress and forced prioritization happens more often. With gifts, you can be a little bit more flexible with your budget. So for example, gift cards are always the most popular gift that we survey on every single year in the holiday season. When you think about gift cards in the context of holiday gifting, for the giver, you get to control how much those gift cards are. And $50 this year was, $50 gift card this year is still $50. It was $50 a couple years ago. The purchasing power of that gift card might be a little bit different for the recipient, but that is one way that we do see shoppers sort of helping to constrain or keep a tight rein on some of their holiday costs. But generally people again do want to be generous and offer, gifts to their friends and family. Clothing is really popular, toys for the kids, always popular, of course. So we do see a lot of that gifting activity is pretty consistent over time.
It makes sense with inflation too, because inflation has been more subdued, particularly for goods and things that might be gifts. Whereas services, it's been a little like up and down with airfare,
Mhm.
but travel in general is a service, and services inflation has been stickier, and especially during the holiday season when there's a ton of demand, everyone's kind of competing for those flights, those hotels, those travel accommodations, and so I can see that being more of a stressor on budgets.
What Claire was saying was just making me think of some of the slides that you had in your report, actually, Sophia, that looked at sort of applying our framework on price sensitivity and trading down to some of these gift categories. Because in addition to just that decision of which gift category am I going to buy, there's there's also there could be another layer to that of maybe you go to the store number one and want to pick out maybe this electronic thing, but then it's a little more expensive than you wanted and you trade down to something else. I guess it's always an option to trade down to gift cards, as Claire was saying. But were there any interesting trends that you wanted to point out, Sophia, from your report about substitution across categories, things like that?
Yeah, so for those of you who are new, I would go back a few episodes where we talk about our supply chain and inflation indexes if you want to really get a good understanding, but I can give a brief overview. Some of our most popular indexes are price sensitivity and substitutability. They're pretty intuitive. Price sensitivity is basically measuring how price sensitive someone is. In other words, a higher price sensitivity score means that consumers are more likely to walk away when the prices are higher than expected. And then substitutability measures the rate of trading down. So we have seen different price sensitivity and substitutability scores for different gifts. For example, we see really high price sensitivity for electronics, books, and toys, but we don't really see a lot of trading down. And then that's different for other categories. We see high price sensitivity and substitutability for skin and hair care, whereas clothing is just more mixed on both measures. It depends on what it is. Like jewelry had really high price sensitivity, but formal clothes had high substitutability. So I would check out that report if you, I'll link it in the description. It's our holiday report. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Claire. That's kind of more specifically on our econ indexes. Does that kind of check out with stuff that you see about gift buying?
It really does. I think, clothing being such a popular gift buying category is massive and it makes a ton of sense, especially when you factor in how much retailers are discounting. And this is true every year, but every year it feels like Black Friday's promotions start a little bit earlier. And we've seen a lot of that, promotional activity already in as early as October and sometimes even before that. So that's also sort of how retailers are helping to mitigate some of that pressure on consumers to trade down is it's a little bit more palatable if it's more than you want to pay, but hey, it's 30% off. So at least you feel like you're still kind of getting a deal.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, Claire, because especially our industry analysts, they do a lot of work on generations, which we sometimes do on the econ team. But I was wondering if you're seeing any big trends differing between different generations because they have very different shopping behaviors.
They definitely have different shopping behaviors. What I called out this year and what I think is interesting is in sort of not necessarily the category of gift, but let's call it like the gift vibes, if you will. And what we see is that younger people are trying to give more sentimental gifts or fun and entertaining gifts, whereas older folks are much more likely to give something practical. It's sort of that like old trope of, your grandma is always going to get you socks or something. That could
My
also be.
mom always gives me socks. Like you would think my mom would be more creative. No offense, mom.
No,
Sorry.
but like I feel like I never have enough socks. So like I'm also at the age where I'm like, yes, please give me socks. Or like, hey, cash is always that's practical, right? Cash is very
I know
practical.
the older we get, we're like, okay, I appreciate it now.
Yes, I appreciate socks way more now than I did when I was
Yeah.
a teenager. That is absolutely true.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also, for the record, like getting socks. Okay, well, this has been really interesting. Thanks so much, Claire. Is there anything that, any blind spots that me and Kayla have that you would like to discuss today?
I think one thing that we didn't cover as much because it's more on my side of the fence is just what retailers can do to help drum up more of the side of excitement rather than the side of financial anxiety for consumers. We talked a bit about the discounting side of it, which that's always going to be part of the plan. It's just the depth and extent of the discounts. But one thing that I am pushing for, and that younger consumers especially are telling us that they want to see from retailers, is more in-store activations and events. Gen Z in particular still really likes to shop in stores. And I think that pre-COVID, we just saw a lot more of this from retailers, not just like the photo with Santa kind of events, but having music or brand pop-ups or like food and drink kind of events within stores. And I think there's demand for that, but it's just something that retailers haven't really brought back in that experiential sense that we used to see a lot more of in the holiday season. And I know retailers are also dealing with inflation and tight budgets and difficulty predicting spending. So I know it's just asking to spend money, but I do think sort of leaning into the more celebratory vibes that also get people to linger and spend more time in stores, which typically leads to spending more money, is all a good thing. So this is, I guess, my plea. It's probably too late for this year, but next year I would love to see more of that in the in-store experience.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see people who have already planned those events benefit from that this holiday season.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you do have that, if you're a retailer listening and you have that on your calendar, invite me first of all,
Yeah.
and I would also I hope it's as successful as I would predict it will be.
Speaking of predictions, not to put you on the spot, Claire, but we sometimes call these fearless forecasts. Do you have a fearless forecast for Black Friday? Do you think it's going to be really big, record breaking, or maybe a little more subdued? Any
I
thoughts?
I think it'll break last year's record. It typically does. So I wouldn't say that's a particularly fearless forecast. That feels like a cautious forecast to me. I think Black Friday remains popular. We survey on it every year. I'll drop a survey into Field right after Black Friday to see how consumers felt about their promotions. But I think what like I've seen Black Friday language used in July, so I think the day is less meaningful, but it's still a big event on consumers' calendars. Typically, something you're going to shop for, from home in your pajamas more so than going out to the stores, though. But I think it'll be a big one. We do, though, see that people who shop a lot on Black Friday aren't necessarily always buying gifts, and a lot of time they're shopping for themselves, and a lot of time it's more impulse shopping. So wealthier people are taking advantage of those deals and discounts, maybe to buy something and kind of get over a little bit of that price surprise, and saying like, okay, well, I'm getting a good deal on it, something you maybe would like to have on your wish list. So being able to shop those big events does require some budget flexibility to sort of let the retailers dictate when and how you're shopping and what you're buying. So as much as you would like to think that it's a big boon for people who are more cash strapped, that's not typically how we see it play out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband, not to call him out on the podcast, but he keeps a running list of things to buy on Black Friday for himself. So like all year, he always participates in Black Friday. So yeah,
I would like to interview him about his shopping behaviors.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Claire. It was really nice having you here. I hope you have a great holiday season yourself. And thanks so much for coming. Do you have anything else to add, Kayla?
No, that was so fun. Thank you, Claire. I always learn so much from you, and I did again today.
Likewise. I read everything you guys write, as you well know, and we get to Slack about it, so I'm very lucky. So thanks for the invite to come on. This was a lot of fun, and I hope all of your holidays go well and you have a lot of cheer.